Welcome to a guide through the formative assessment process, Module 3, Item Types. This module will provide educators with considerations for developing a rigorous assessment item, identifying and describing 3 types of assessment items for formative classroom assessments, assigning an appropriate assessment type to a skill, and utilizing a blueprint to determine an appropriate item type for each skill based on level of rigor. There are several considerations to make when determining assessment item type. First, identify the standard to assess in the lessons or unit of study, and also determine the skills in the standard and/or learning target. Second, determining the level of rigor in the skill and/or learning target will help guide the most appropriate type of item to use for assessing the skill. Third, assign one or more item type to each skill. Be sure to consider all the options for item type for each skill. Finally, design your item type. We consider an assessment to be a collection of one or more of what we often think of as questions that students answer. Assessment professionals routinely use the term item instead of question because, as we will see, an assessment item is not always written as a question. This module emphasizes on the types of assessment items that teachers create for students for formative and summative purposes. The term item is not a word you hear on a regular basis, but for the purpose of this module, the term item will be utilized when discussing questions on an assessment. This module focuses on 3 types of assessment items that educators can construct: selected response items, constructed response items, and performance tasks. This presentation will help to establish a common understanding of each of the item types and when best to select each item type. Teachers have experience writing item types for various classroom assessments. We're most familiar with the selected response item form of assessment. It is one in which the student is asked to select each response from a set of specific alternatives. Because the student chooses a response from a group of options, rather than providing a written response, such an assessment is called a selected response assessment. Examples of selected response items include matching, true and false, and multiple choice. Here on the slide there are a few examples. Let's discuss some of the pluses and deltas of selected response items. Selected response items offer a major advantage. They are efficient. They can use selected response items to assess a range of student knowledge and skills, and you can score them faster than any other types of assessment items. Even if well-designed selected response items can assess higher order thinking, they can't do so in the same straight manner as constructed response items and performance tasks. This is because students are selecting the answer each time, not forming it themselves. Students can likewise guess the answers to selected response items, which makes the results less accurate. Last, a lengthy assessment that compromises only selected response items can overwhelm and frustrate students and hence lack engagement. On the other hand, a constructed response assessment can require a student to develop his or her own answer in response to a stimulus or prompt. An assessment of this form, such as the one that requires an essay or a solution to a mathematical problem, is called a constructed response assessment. Examples of constructed response items include fill in the blank, short and long responses, and essays. We use answer keys to score simpler constructed response items, such as fill in the blank items. We use scoring guides to score more complex constructed response items, such as short and long answer items. Let's discuss some of the pluses and deltas of constructed response items. Constructed response items offer some benefits that selected response items do not. For example, they are less susceptible than selected response items to errors from guessing because students have to generate an answer versus selecting it from a list of potential answers. It also is easier to assess higher order thinking skills and demonstration of students' complex thinking with constructed response items than it is with selected response items. However, depending on the type of constructed response item, they can take longer to score and also require thought in creating them. We can think of constructed response items as short, written performance tasks. Performance tasks ask students to create products or performance tasks to show their mastery of particular skills. A performance task is a written or hands-on demonstration of mastery or progress toward mastery of a particular skill or a standard. A performance task is any learning activity or assessment that asks students to perform to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding, and proficiency. Unlike a selected response item that probes learners to select from given options, a performance task presents a condition that requires students to apply their learning in context. Scoring guides and rubrics are utilized to score all types of performance tasks. Let's discuss some of the pluses and deltas of performance tasks. Performance tasks offer several benefits beyond selected and constructed response items. First and foremost, they place student demonstration of ability at the center of assessment. They approximate real-world application of complex skills more closely than other types of items and allow students to actively demonstrate their learning and skills. Performance assessments also can assess capabilities outside content, knowledge, and skills. For instance, communication, cooperation, organization, time management, self-monitoring, and persistence. Well-designed performance tasks also are usually more engaging for students than other types of assessments. Performance tasks also derive a set of challenges that can be time-consuming to design and score. In addition, they require consistent, unbiased methods for scoring. Now we will continue to consider how a blueprint organizer can help the design of an assessment. The blueprint organizer tool on this slide is a great way to help the planning for and organizing of classroom assessment items. In addition, the blueprint helps to ensure alignment. The template helps you to study the content and the standards that students need to master, and then address that content in your assessment and instructional plans. Sections to include in a template are standards, skill, rigor, and item type, as well as the primary purpose of the assessment. In addition, the blueprint helps to ensure alignment. The template helps you to study the content in the standard that students need to master, and then address that content in your assessments and instructional plans. Now that we have a clear understanding of the parts of the blueprint, let's look at this sample. 3 skills are identified in the standard: introduce a topic or text clearly, state an opinion, and create an organizational structure in which ideas are logically grouped to support the writer's purpose. Introduce, state, and create are the skills in the standard. For each skill, a level of rigor is determined as well as an appropriate item type to measure students' mastery of the skill. This is an example of a blueprint completed for a summative assessment for a unit of study. Why is it important for a classroom teacher to focus on assessment alignment? Assessments that I use in my classroom do not demand the same level of statistical scrutiny as large-scale standardized tests, but I can consider 5 elements of assessment design to ensure that my assessments are reasonably valid and reliable. Once I master how to address these 5 elements, I will be able to plan, write, and select assessments that have an appropriate level of validity and reliability for use in my classroom. Let's review the considerations for developing a rigorous assessment item. Determine the primary purpose of the assessment. Utilize a blueprint for planning the assessment. Identify the skills addressed in the standard. Identify the level of rigor of each skill. Write assessment items to match the level of rigor. This concludes the presentation on item types.